as I slowly realized, is like that wasn't the case. And even when I wanted to bring up my mental health, I could see that some people were just not ready for that yet. But
Yep.
I'm happy
Yep.
that, things are, I'm gonna say slowly changing, because I think that is the truth. I think we've seen a lot of movement since COVID, but it's
Sure.
still slow progress, which, like, in actuality, if you're gonna go into any like work on social justice, you have to probably kind of have to be accustomed to things moving slowly. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how things work, though, especially
Yep. Yep.
with social justice issues.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we strive to empower and inspire our listeners to live their most audacious lives ever. I'm Audley Stevenson, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us, dedicating your time to join our journey of personal growth and empowerment. You know, when you think about living an audacious life, it's very much kind of like riding a roller coaster. You know, it's filled with all kinds of unexpected twists and turns, but the thrill of the ride makes it all worth it. Just like how we embrace the ups and downs of the roller coaster, embracing that audaciousness in our lives leads to all sorts of exciting opportunities for growth and transformation. Today we have a special guest who embodies the essence of audacious living. Zane Landin is a passionate advocate for mental health and disability rights and joins us to share his inspiring journey and insights into creating a positive impact in the world. Hey, Zane, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate making the time like this.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor.
Look, I'm the one that's honored because the opportunity to have, really hearty and engage in great dialogue and conversations to help people kind of get to a better place is always exhilarating for me. So I do, again, appreciate this opportunity. Specifically, want to spend some time talking into the mental health field. There's an area that you've done a whole lot of work in and have a lot of experience in, and really, it's a topic that can't be under discussed, if you will. I think it's far-reaching. Many individuals are impacted in a variety of different ways. Some subtle and some not so much. So I think it's worthwhile dedicating some time and having a discussion to it. So maybe as a starting point, we can get you to sort of dialogue and explain and tell our listeners a little bit about you and how you landed on the space that you're at.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much again for having me on your platform. It's really exciting. My name is Zane Landin. I'm 25 years old. I'm originally from California. I lived there for, I would say, 95% of my life until this past year, which I had the opportunity to move across the country to um, Washington, D.C., because I actually work for the National Geographic Society. And so I have been doing that since November. So the end of November is actually going to be my 1 year. Whenever you get this out, maybe it'll be past my 1 year already, but just know in a couple of weeks, my 1 year will be coming up.
Well, congratulations in advance.
Thank you. And it's really exciting because I remember just starting and just being there for a few months. I was soaking up so much information, just learning as much as I could and still am, but it came a lot faster than I thought. But it's been a great opportunity. I am currently an internal communication specialist.
Okay.
And so what that means for, not every company has an internal communication specialist, but I do hope your company does invest in internal communications, because that is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. If there's not a solidified message that internally goes across the company. And I think
Yep.
COVID-19 really stressed the importance of internal communications. I don't think
Sure.
that's one of the lessons that people took away from it, but it's one that I did, because I don't know how you communicated thoroughly during COVID if you didn't have a strong internal communications strategy.
Right.
And so some companies had to kind of start over and figure out what that meant for them and how they're going to communicate. And you really couldn't rely on word of mouth anymore
Yep.
as much as you used to. And again, if your company is relying on word of mouth to spread information, that's not a good strategy.
Right.
And this is also coming from someone that's entry level. I'm still very new to the field, and I'm just again learning and soaking up as much as I can. Um, but I get to do really exciting projects, and aside from that, I also get to be the co-lead for the inclusion network for the disability one. And so disability does encompass mental health. And so I describe myself as a disability advocate. Some people kind of separate that from mental health. They are the same. And in general, just anything that impacts health, I'm always really interested in addressing. So that's kind of my story, what I've been up to. Personally, like I said, I'm a mental health advocate. I've been doing this work since I was a university student, which is kind of makes sense when we look at the statistics of how much young people and especially college students face mental health issues, because a lot of the stress that they experience. And I think that the reason why we're seeing a lot of young people being impacted more, I don't know if it's they're impacted more or if it's that they're just a lot more vocal about it. It just really depends on what those factors are. But I do see, I think a lot of people share, a lot of issues of mental health. But I think,
Right.
the younger generation, like my generation, Generation Z, is kind of paving the way and talking more about it. And I really hope that, older generations do follow that, because what I do hear from a lot of other generations is that we're the sensitive generation, that we bring up topics that nobody wants to talk about or that we shouldn't. And like I said, I understand, because you're coming from a generation where that's just kind of frowned upon,
Well,
or
yeah, yeah.
a huge taboo. But as times change, I really hope that you consider it. Again, you don't have to yourself, but I hope you accept that this is kind of the way the world is moving. And also, I do empathize with people from the older generation. Sometimes I see that they get some unnecessary hate, that they are like blamed for building this supposed system. But again, not many people had the power to do that, and a lot of people that could speak about mental health or wanted to, they couldn't.
Right.
And now when I
It
hear
was
in the
taboo. It wasn't allowed to. It was frowned upon. There's a
yeah.
whole bunch of things that made it difficult to speak what was going on with you without being labeled as weak or what other sort of judgment is out there.
Yeah, and so when I hear people, that they'll just nonchalantly just say, "Oh, I have a therapist," or "I see a therapist," and I hear that just openly in the workplace, even if we're not even talking about mental health, or if it's not even a sanctioned discussion, that to me is exciting, that they feel comfortable enough to bring it up, and that the culture around them is willing to embrace that. It's just really exciting, because again, there was a time, even I noticed it, as a kid, that just some things you didn't talk about, and even though I saw psychologists growing up, and so sometimes I was in this space where it was normal to address my
Yeah.
mental health. But as I slowly kind of grew, as I slowly realized, is like that wasn't the case. And even when I wanted to bring up my mental health, I could see that some people were just not ready for that yet. But
Yep.
I'm happy
Yep.
that things are, I'm gonna say, slowly changing, because I think that is the truth. I think we've seen a lot of movement since COVID, but still
Sure.
slow progress, which, like, in actuality, if you're going to go into any like work on social justice, you have to probably kind of have to be accustomed to things moving slowly. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how things work, though, especially
Yep. Yep.
with social justice issues.
I find when you sort of talk about today's generation, I find them very much an advocate for themselves.
Hmm.
They speak up a lot more on issues. When I was 12, 13, 14, 15, there were conversations that I didn't even know existed that young people are having today. When we saw a student who was maybe was acting on class, let's just say, they were labeled as a bad student, and there was nothing explored to see, are their learning needs being met, are there other things happening for what that was. It was just assumed they were labeled a bad student, go sit in a corner, and that was it.
Hmm.
Just very recently, so I coach my son's basketball team at school, and we just started very recently. And one of the players on the team came to me and said, "Hey, coach, listen, just so you know, I've got this disability." And he started to explain sort of what his condition is. And he said, so I said, "Well, what do you need from me?" And he was able to articulate. I said, "No problem. If there's anything that's not, if I'm missing the mark, please let me know." And again, when I was that age, I was not having that conversation. I think young people are far more equipped and knowledgeable and very much advocates, which I think is a great thing.
Yeah, and I think that some people would argue that, like being an advocate for yourself and addressing your needs, some people would radically say that that is selfish. I hope that, more people are not kind of believing that, because
Oh, yeah.
I
Hmm.
don't think it's selfish to advocate.
I don't believe that either at all. No, I think you're standing up for yourself. We each have our own individual needs, things that we require, and especially in the learning space. And
Mhm.
so by stepping up and saying, "Hey, this is what I need," that's not selfish at all. That's just being an advocate for yourself. So I see it.
Yeah, and I do think that, people that believe that, I think it's kind of sad. I think that they live in a sad space where someone standing up for themselves or what they believe in or their values or advocating for
Yeah,
themselves, that's seen as selfish. And I'm like, okay, but if you take a hard look at yourself and you are living in pain or depression, whatever it is, wouldn't you want to do something about that instead of wanting
yeah,
to just kind of sulk in it? Like to me, that's just a sad thing that you feel you have to be pressured to do rather than addressing it, you know?
right. No, no, I hear you. No, no, I for those that think the way they do that, and if they think that way, I'm not with them, man. That's the bottom line. Um,
Yeah.
what drew you to the mental health space to begin with? Like you've been doing this for a little while. You said to university. What got you there?
Well, I did mention, briefly that I saw a psychologist growing up, and that was my lived experience for a long time. Ever since I was like a kid, I experienced like a decline in my mental health. But I think luckily for me that my family knew about it, not just about me, but they just knew that mental health was important, that it was equal to physical health, that you
Hmm.
should address it because it is very serious. So yeah, so that's how I was able to kind of see a psychologist growing up, and I do feel for people that don't have families that understand the mental health world, and it makes it very difficult for young people to address their health. So that's what I would say about that. So yeah, I saw psychologists growing up, and then I stopped seeing them in university because I felt like I was doing a lot better, and I was. I think the first 2 years of university I was doing really well. And of
Okay.
course, I would always have periods of depression because that is normal. That's never going to go away. That's
Yep.
just kind of how I'm wired. Even when I'm in a good place, sometimes I do have a little anxiety that stability will, change a bit.
Sure. Sure.
So like everything. And so yeah, and there was a time in my life in university where it was just like probably the hardest time of my life. And there was like a lot of different things happening, overwhelming things that I couldn't control.
Right.
Trying to convince people that that they should support me, but at that time it just wasn't the thing for them. They just were at a different place in what I wanted. And so yeah, I'm not going into like specific details, but that was the kind of the case. And like there was a
Sure.
lot of
I
things
get you.
happening. Yeah, and like I was just, oh my goodness, I was like just engaging in like really harmful behaviors, like or actions of self-harm, thinking about suicide. And again,
Right.
this I'm never engaged in self-harm, but with the suicide stuff, I've always kind of thought about it growing up.
Mm.
Again, periodically. But at what that moment, I felt like I had no control of my thoughts. That like those were the thoughts I always thought about, like
Right.
so frequently. It was like really overwhelming. And so I decided, upon myself that, I took the semester off. I was like, I need to just kind of, what's the term? I need to reset. I need to really figure out how I'm going to move forward from this and reset. And I understand not everyone can do that, but I decided to do it for myself and see what that meant because I wasn't doing well in all areas in school,
Right.
in my job, in many areas. I wasn't succeeding or thriving, and so I decided to take the semester off and then again reevaluate, really kind of reflect on every single thing that I've learned from my psychologist and starting to see like another on-site psychologist at my university. That was
Yep.
after the semester ended though. But yeah, I just kind of decided what I wanted to change in my life. And at this point, I knew about the things that I wanted to see, but this time it was I
Right.
really need to be a lot more vocal about them if I was going to, in a way, survive my thoughts. And so
Right. Right.
when I
Right.
came
Right.
back the next semester, a lot of things changed, my mentality changed. I had a different mindset. And so I think that was what helped me the most. And
Got you.
then I
And that's a
also
big deal.
needed
That's
a
the mind.
community.
Sorry to cut you, but that the mindset
Okay.
is a really big deal, right? Like to have a when you can change that. So no, congratulations on figuring that out.
No, yeah, thank you. And yeah, so my mindset was totally shifted. It was very different. And then I wanted a community as well. And so I wanted to create my own community, not necessarily create something from the ground up, but join an organization like Active Minds, which is a student-led like mental health organization. There's several
Okay.
chapters at universities. And so I joined things like that, and I educated myself a lot more on a lot of aspects of mental health. And at the time, I was becoming a disability advocate by joining different groups on my college campus, and then just I was almost gonna say slowly. No, it feels like it was an explosion where like I went from like not being an advocate to being an advocate almost all the time. If it
Right.
was disability or mental health or whatever it was so many components. And it wasn't the first time I engaged in social justice work. Like I had before. It was just these these communities I hadn't really been a part of, which is interesting because like I actually am a part of them. I didn't think I was or know I was until it I had that realization or an epiphany, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's where I became an advocate, and that's how I ended up in the space I am today. And I know that some people look at the work I do with communications and media because I got my degree in public relations.
Yeah.
And I think people question, how does that connect to your passion for mental health? And I go, the idea that you don't see how that connects is the problem, and that we need a lot more communications professionals in the mental health and disability space.
Right. Right.
That's the reason why. And so when a lot of people look at my advocacy work, it is stemmed from a lot of media, how mental health is portrayed, and how we
Yeah.
can use communications to, shift mindsets that is, creating a more positive culture of mental health.
Got you. Got you. So out of curiosity, as you mentioned, you referenced your work in as a disability advocate.
Mhm.
Is there a personal connection to that, or were you just drawn to the cause?
Definitely personal connection. Just growing up, I've always had, just like you said, with the classroom, I always had uh, problems in the classroom because things were accelerating too fast. It wasn't
Mm.
at the pace that I needed to really learn. And so I was on a 504 plan growing up, which is like it's basically an individualized education plan, but it is different. And then I got like individualized tutoring, and that was just kind of the accommodations I needed to be equal with my peers. And again, I know a lot of people are going to question and be like, well, that was you getting an extra leg up. I'm like, no, it's not at all, actually. It was actually just to get me to an equal spot. Like the education system is very difficult, especially if you're thinking differently. And especially when instructors are kind of taught to teach from, I don't want to say a basic level, but almost a universal level. That this is
Right.
how students really learn. It's like we need to really create more modes of education for other people because it is not a one size fits all, and we know
Right.
this. But it's taken us a while to kind of get there, and that's why there is a lot of work of educators doing like universal classroom design, or like how to make the classroom more accessible and more equitable to people who learn differently, or who have learning disabilities, whatever it is, however you want to frame it. But yeah, so that it is a personal connection, but it wasn't really until university with the whole thing with my mental health, and
Right.
then me kind of struggling with school again, and then kind of getting support from the disability services and realizing I don't really remember this as a child, but I remember going through this process. And yes, I do have problems with, the education system. And what was I going to say lastly about that? Nope, that's kind of it.
No problem. Um, so your mental health work is sort of taking you all sorts of places. As I understand, you and President Biden got to rub elbows, eh?
Yeah, that, yeah, my goodness, that was last year, and it was May of 2021. Yes. No, sorry, May of 2022. May of 2022, and that was for the first ever Mental Health Youth Action Forum. I know that there's probably been several mental health forums and
Mhm.
action forums, yes. But this was kind of the first ever one I think the White House has done, where they decided to prioritize youth mental health and intersectional youth mental health. I know it was about youth mental health, but they really tried to address mental health from a really intersectional lens.
Yeah.
And for people who don't, I've never heard that term. It just kind of means just addressing every dynamic of mental health, every single kind of person, every single kind of group. That is fairly difficult because you're obviously not going to get representation of every single person, but as much as you can get from as many diverse groups and diverse mindsets as possible, that is where you can really holistically address mental health. So yeah, I discovered the application in November of
Right.
2021. And I actually almost convinced myself not to apply for it. Kind of like it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy that I was telling myself that, well, maybe it's not that. I actually would have been, because if I decided not to apply, of course, I'm not going to get it. Completely self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I decided to just hit the submit button. Of course, like take my time and fill out the application, which was pretty minimal. It
Yeah.
wasn't like an extensive application, which I was a little happy about, but I decided to apply for it. I heard back in January
Okay.
that I was a semifinalist. I actually discovered it in my spam email,
Oh,
which is
wow.
why
That's wild.
I'm like,
You almost missed it.
like high alert. I always tell people like, make sure you look at your spam email, because if I hadn't looked at my spam, I no, I wouldn't have gone, because I wouldn't have seen it. So I always check my spam. You never know what's in there.
It's
And
true.
so I filled out again another application. Then in February is when I got the email that I was selected, and I kind of just had to sit there. I kind of had to sit there, and it really had to go through my head, because I felt kind of numb at that moment, because I was like, no, it's not real. Like, this is not real.
Right,
Like,
right, 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 right.
no, this is, I don't feel excited about this. Why don't I feel excited? I think it took like a good 3 minutes of me reading the email over like a couple of times to go, oh, this is real. And this is like incredibly exciting. And so it was interesting how I kind of reacted when I first got it. Like,
Right, right.
I mean, it made sense I reacted that way, because again, I almost convinced myself not to apply, because I told myself I wasn't ready for it, or I
Yes,
wasn't going to be
sure.
selected. So it made sense maybe that I reacted that way.
I got you.
But
I got
then, after, it wasn't just, we went to the event and that was it. Like, we had months of preparation for our pitches, because we had like, there was like two components of the forum, which was advocating at the White House. And then there was also like a pitch, not competition, but like a pitch presentation where we were split into groups, and we provided media companies with ideas of how they can address mental health. And if they like our ideas, that they can pick them up and
Yep.
provide us funding or partnerships or whatever. And yeah, that was really exciting. And our idea was like a peer-to-peer podcast. It didn't really kick off, but it was still super exciting to present to like Pinterest and Spotify,
Sure.
and Zoom. Zoom provided us with a stipend. Pinterest provided us with a stipend, not just our group, but the entire cohort.
Well,
And
it's an
so,
incredible experience, right? Regardless of the outcome, it's an incredible experience and something
oh my
special
gosh,
to be a part of, right? That's a big deal.
very, yeah, it's like, it was a huge experience. Yeah, it didn't really matter on what the outcome was going to be, because
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the outcome was going to be going to the White House. And so that was, it was just such an amazing thing. And I think that, I mean, there's no doubt that the White House experience has been so instrumental in where I am in my life. And it's not only
good
the
for
White
you.
House. I mean, of course, that's a huge part of it, but I think the White House event was just a huge like catalyst
Yep,
in my self-worth. And not that that was the only thing that was important, but like I said, the moment I got to do that kind of events afterward, I was like, I do have an important voice, and I do want to share it more. And that's why I've been, sharing my story a lot more of mental health and the work
good
that
for
I'm
you.
doing. But what I find even like kind of sadly funny in a way is like, even going to like the White House, I still was not at a place where I felt like my voice was important. And that's not unique to me at all. Like, the sad thing is like probably billions of people feel that way,
Right.
which is a sad thing. But again, every single voice is incredibly important and equally important.
Absolutely.
So that was a really, really exciting event. And I know you're referring to, there's a picture of me with Biden, like a selfie with him and all 30 of us. And again, what's funny is Biden wasn't on what's it called? Sorry, he wasn't on the press release. So none of us were expecting him to be there.
Ah,
We were only expecting the people that we knew were going to be there, which was Dr. Biden, Dr. Murthy, and Selena Gomez, who kind
which
of
are pretty,
served as she
which are
kind of
those are
served
pretty
as the
big deals,
keynote,
right?
which is great, because she's really vocal about it. So she was a great person that they selected for that
Good,
opportunity. But
good.
yeah, so he wasn't there, and he literally just strolled in. Like, there was
Right.
no there was no,
No heads up,
I
no
don't know what I'm
warning.
thinking, but
Just
sometimes I think when you think of the president, or you think they're bigger than life, but no, he
sure.
just strolled in unannounced and just like walked in, and we're just like, oh wait, that's him. Like, oh, that's Biden. Oh, that's our president. Like, I'm telling you, that's how it felt. It was so
Awesome.
interesting how he just came in like almost secretly, and like none of us
Awesome.
noticed. And then I like
Awesome.
remember turning around, I'm like, oh, is that Biden? That kind of looks like him. I swear, I don't know what was going on. It felt like a fever dream of like, did this really happen? But it did, and it was really exciting.
Very cool. No, that's certainly a good experience, a great experience. But I think the part about that's really neat is that, it's for a worthwhile, it's an important cause, right? So it wasn't just about, hey, meeting the president. It was meeting
Right.
the president because you're doing important work, and so that's fabulous. Um, I guess I'm, wondering from your perspective, from a wellness perspective,
Mhm.
um, what would you suggest, or what's your thoughts on sort of the best way with dealing with mental health challenges for people?
Well, I guess I'm always going to say the best way is, of course, individual. It's really going to depend on, again, what your unique needs are. I really hope that people take mental health seriously as a science. And I say as science because I think some people are going to say, well, I'm not going to see a psychologist. I'm not going to see a psychiatrist. I'm like, well, you see a family doctor, and it's
Right.
just as important. And if you really don't know how to begin, just do research or just ask your primary doctor. I'm sure your doctor knows about mental health. I'm sure they know about people they can refer you to. I'm sure they have a network of psychiatrists. Like, just start with that. And again, if you don't feel comfortable with that, well, maybe you need to find a different primary doctor if that's the case. But if not, again, there's also so many organizations like the Jet Foundation, Active Minds, Mental Health America,
Right.
National Alliance on Mental Illness, which I'm on the youth board for that. And some of these organizations provide free opportunities, free counseling. And also, some of these organizations do provide stipends for therapy because I know a lot of people do say that they can't afford therapy.
Right.
While that is true, there are organizations that can provide you a stipend, 100%.
It's wonderful.
It is, of course, difficult to find that, but those resources are out there. Um, it's really about, just you finding the courage to reach out for help yourself. Or again, if you know someone that is struggling, that you provide them with resources, you provide them with referrals, anything you can. It's not your job to take up their pain, but
Mm.
you can be there for them and provide resource for them
Yeah.
as much as possible. Um,
A
I
great way
would
of
say
providing
that. Yeah, I would
support.
say, take it, yeah, take it seriously. If you're interested, see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And I know that I know that equity is sometimes a problem here, but I still think people's mindset is the problem. That even if people do have the opportunity to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, they're still fearful of doing it. And so
Understandable.
again, it has to be about, just kind of moving beyond the mental stigma, which everyone experiences, and just kind of saying, I don't really care what people think, and I'm going to do this for myself. And again, nobody has to know either. Like, nobody has to know. And if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, you don't need to talk about it. I think that what I don't like about sometimes with mental health is sometimes people are pressured to speak, especially men. I feel like, you know, as we move into this space of being more vulnerable, I think sometimes people are pressured to speak. Like, men need to be more vulnerable. It's like, well, you know what? That is for them to decide. It's not for us to
Yep.
decide. If being
Individual
vulnerable
journey.
for them
Yep.
is sending a text message or just saying something or whatever it is for them to be vulnerable, I think you can challenge them and say, we can explore that more. Like, let's talk more about it. And again, if they're not interested or they're not comfortable, it's not fair for you to pressure either. And you
That's
shouldn't
right.
have to, try and change someone unless it's like a huge issue or it's impacting their health or
Sure.
their
Sure.
mind. That's different. But again,
Good
we should
point.
not pressure people to speak. So if someone wants to see psychologists and they don't want to talk about it, they do not have to talk about it at all. That
Right.
is
Right.
their entire choice. And even if they attend a mental health event and everyone's talking about it, they do not have to talk about it still. That is
Yeah.
no one should ever feel pressure to do that because again, talking is not the only solution. It's a good one. Like, it's nice to talk to people and connect in that way, but there are other ways to connect. You don't have to be honest about
Right.
everything in your life.
Yep.
We don't need to be honest about everything. We aren't anyways. We shouldn't be.
Oh, no, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. No, good point. That's a really good point. The last thing I want to ask you about, and it's great to see that you've taken your communications degree and your public relations experience, and you've started your own digital magazine. I wonder if you can sort of talk a little bit about what Positive Vibes is looking to do, and what it actually is.
Oh my goodness, yes. What's cool is, when you mentioned the degree, I actually started the magazine while I was in university because I will just say first, it is a digital magazine that's dedicated to just sharing the stories of people. It's kind of like a written form of like, an interviewing based podcast, which is really cool. And so I started it in university because I was actually taking a class on copy editing.
Okay.
And so our final project was, hey, create your own publication, and I'm going to
Mhm.
send you the articles. You determine if you want to put them in your publication. Again, this is all pseudo. This is not real. But we're thinking like an editor, and we think, why would I not want this in the magazine? And so
Right.
I decided to do a magazine based on, the positive mental health experience. Because also I think that, when you talk about mental health, people think about the scary side of mental health, the negative of mental health, but there's also, a joy of mental health. I know that sounds so counterintuitive or contradictory, but it's not. Like, if we only focus on the negative or the darkness it brings, quote unquote, we're only going to see it that way. And
Yep.
so yeah, so I decided with my friend, we decided to actually start digital magazine because we wanted to see something like that, especially in the era of COVID. Oh, because I didn't mention, it was like May of 2020 when I was working on the final project, which was
Oh,
we were
in the
basically
heart of it.
in COVID when it basically started.
Yeah,
And I thought it was the perfect opportunity for the mainstream media to shine a light more on mental health, because it was something that was, I feel like that's something mental health like really connected people during COVID, because people were
absolutely.
finally they were talking about it more. And I think there were people that had never not that they necessarily have never experienced mental health, but that drastically of losing
Sure.
family members or seeing
Yep.
people dying around them, and the
Yep.
whole world kind of
Or even
collapsed.
the uncertainty of life, right? Like we didn't
Yeah,
know what was happening around the corner.
that's yeah, right. And so unfortunately, the mainstream media didn't really take the initiative in doing that, which is okay. It's not a huge surprise. But I decided, I was like, well, I want to do it then. Like, I want, it's not going to reach mainstream level at all, but I want to, tell mental health stories in the way I thought that they should be told. And so
Yeah.
we started off writing blogs, and then we quickly shifted into, interviewing people, because we had someone reach out. And the moment we
Yep.
interviewed them and the moment they reached out and we interviewed them and released it, that was where like kind of everything changed, and we just kind of decided to focus on people and their stories, and of course also connected it to mental health and wellness. And the way that we define positivity is, I know a lot of people go, well, you're interviewing people that have talked about suicide or being assaulted or whatever it is. How is that positivity? I'm like, how is it not positivity? It might not sound like positivity, but for people to live their, for people to live, like, how do I say this? For people to express and live with their authenticity, to me, is what
Yep.
positivity is. And
Gotcha.
positivity to me is a philosophy, it's a mindset. It's not this idea that you're always going to be happy, because real positive thinkers know that's impossible.
No.
And if you're trying to achieve that, you're going to fail, because you cannot be positive all the time. It's just a mindset to have when something does happen. You have more effective tools to address it rather than if you didn't.
Gotcha. Gotcha. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. You can't be happy all the time. I think the hazard many people fall into is to try to deny emotions, right?
Yeah.
Where I think emotions are a natural part of the human experience, quite frankly, and they just are. And whether we want to accept them or not, they are. So I think denying our
Mhm.
emotions is a hazard. It's a road that we probably wouldn't want to go down because it will lead to other issues. So,
Well, and
then
then
yeah, go ahead.
oh, last
Go
thing I was
ahead.
gonna say is, we know what happens when you do. If you repress your emotions, they just come out in greater forces. And for people that do, like, there's actually scientific evidence, which is obvious, but it does point that if you're gonna repress your emotions, you're actually increasing your chance of like heart attack, heart failure, high cholesterol.
Sure.
So
Oh,
it's gonna have a visceral physical effect on you if you decide to, again, avoid your emotions. And it's so counterintuitive to people say, well, mental health isn't important, physical health is. Okay, but if you don't address your mental health, it's going to drastically negatively impact your physical health. So you should probably address
correct.
it both in the way that you want.
Yep. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. So, on that note, keep smiling. And if you want to cry, cry. That's all I say, right? Let it out. Let it out. Hey, Zane, this has been awesome. The time that we had to connect like this. For our listeners that want to learn more about you or catch up or check out your magazine, where could we send them?
Yeah, well, the magazine is called Positive Vibes Magazine, one word, Positive Vibes, and then Positive Vibes Mag is the handle. You could type that in, it should come up, and you could read the stories of the people we featured, or if you want to be featured, reach out yourself. And then the last thing is, oh, I mean, I make myself as accessible as possible. So if you just type in my name, all my stuff will come up. I don't have like a fun handle, it's just my name.
All right. It gets the job done, right?
Yeah.
That's all it counts. For sure. Well, look, man, I really do appreciate you doing this. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks for your insights. Congrats on the great work again. Being an advocate and the manner that you are, and really pushing the envelope and making sure issues are on the forefront is such an important work. So keep going, and congrats, my friend. Thank you. Zane Landin's story reminds us that true audacity lies in advocating for ourselves and others, especially in the realm of mental health. Absolutely. By embracing our vulnerabilities and seeking help when needed, we open up doors to a brighter future filled with purpose and resilience. Let Zane's journey inspire you to take bold steps towards living your best audacious life. Thank you for tuning into the Audacious Living podcast. And remember, audacity is not just a mindset, it's a way of life. Embrace your uniqueness, face challenges head on, and always strive to make positive difference in the world around us. Join us next time for more inspiring conversation and insights on how to live your most audacious life. Stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.